So let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. Total domestic box office from this past Easter weekend was $136 million, so a 27% jump. And if I'm not mistaken, let me kind of look it up in real time here. If I'm not mistaken, it's the biggest weekend of the year so far. Yeah, it's the biggest weekend of the year so far, which I don't necessarily think Easter is, but Easter's much earlier this year, so maybe it's not really have anything to do with Easter. But it's a 27% jump from the previous weekend. Big factor of that, like more than half of that, is coming from our number one film this weekend, Godzilla x Kong. I don't know how you're supposed to say it. Is it Godzilla meet with Kong or what? Anyway, Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, bringing in $80 million. So this was a big overperformer. I had read that it was projected to bring in about $43 to $52 million for the weekend. So it more or less almost doubled that. So really impressive showing. Again, maybe not so impressive, in a vacuum, but compared to what people were saying it was going to make, it at least was maybe a nice surprise for, I think it's Warner Brothers, right? And it was made for about $135 million. That was its budget. And so far it's grossed about $194 million worldwide. So it's already crossed that budget number. Typically films, advertising and marketing isn't part of the budget. So they say roughly, whatever the budget is, you should double that number. And that's the number it needs to make at the box office to break even. So it's definitely gone a long way in doing that. Again, we'll see, as I say every week, we'll see kind of like what the legs are on this thing. But hearing kind of the reviews, it sounds like it's kind of not, it's not being critically super well received, but normal moviegoers, I think, really like it, because in America, we love to see giant monsters punching stuff. And I don't say that in a negative light necessarily, So I think this could be not quite a sleeper hit, but I could see this, next weekend, it's worldwide hitting closer to like 300. That's my prediction. Now, I'll probably forget my predictions, so, you heard it here first. So if any of you are watching and you remember this for next week, let me know if I was right or wrong. Only other things opening this week were two, I believe, Indian films. Coming in at number 8, Telugu Square, coming in at about $1.9 million. And then number 9, a film called Crew, coming in at $1.5 million. Again, I couldn't really find any info about these movies, and their budgets were in like some obscure Indian currency, not even rupees, so I couldn't even really get a sense of like how much they were made for versus like, this very small number. But it's clear that, these are obviously not big ticket items, right? But this is a period of some pretty big ticket items. So films continuing this week, we have that Ghostbusters film, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, coming in at number 2 with $16 million for the weekend. Godzilla x Kong dethroned it at the top, so it dropped from first to second in its second weekend here. 65% drop, right? And I think I had said this is a prediction I do remember saying last week, that I wouldn't be surprised if it had a pretty big drop. Just because, again, it's these newer Ghostbuster films have not done particularly well, critically or commercially. And also, like, Ghostbusters is not the brand that I think Hollywood thinks it is. I just don't think it has or has ever had quite the following that they try to make it seem, in terms of like how like the trailers are so reverent for like the Ghostbusters brand. It's like this legacy sequel. So this is not surprising. I think everyone who really wanted to see it already saw it, right? So that 65% drop is not that surprising. But so far in its 2-week run now, it's made about $73 million domestically, $109 million worldwide, off of a $100 million budget. So again, it's worldwide, it's crossed that minimum budget threshold, but ideally you would want to see it hit at least $200 million worldwide to hopefully recoup some of those costs, right? Also in its second week now is Immaculate, the Sydney Sweeney Catholic horror film, coming in at number 5, bringing in about $3.3 million for the weekend. Dropped from 4th to 5th in the second frame. I don't know if you can kind of see. If you take a look at this list, basically the list is more or less exactly the same as last week, but just everything just went down one because of Godzilla and Kong. So dropped from 4th to 5th, only a 39% drop. So again, I still have not yet seen it, but I've heard it is okay. which is gold for a cheap horror movie kind of like this. And again, cheap. It was only made for about $9 million, but so far it's made about $11 million domestically, $13 million worldwide. So again, it's getting there, and if it kind of can hold out in the next even just like through April, it could be like a decent performer for the film. And also considering Sydney Sweeney has been very successful lately, with Anyone But You, that romantic comedy she was in with Glenn Powell, doing very well considering it was a rom-com. So I would imagine a lot of this is off of just people being obsessed with Sydney Sweeney, because she's just a very prominent Gen Z actress and she's hot, right? I mean, let's just call it what it is. And I think she knows that. She's like talked about that, right? So, but however you're bringing them in, keep bringing them in, right? If I'm the people who made Immaculate. Another film continuing this week, coming at number 7, Late Night with the Devil, a kind of indie horror film, bringing in about $2.2 million. It actually held 7th place in its second frame and only had a 22% drop, which is interesting. I've heard good things. I think I'm seeing it this week, on Wednesday. So hopefully I can get you my thoughts on that. But that's a pretty decent hold. Now, again, it didn't really make a lot to begin with, right? To be fair. But again, that percentage, it's holding a little bit strong. So far, it's made about $6.3 million domestically, $6.6 million worldwide. Only other thing I wanted to mention here, so coming into over a month now at the box office is Dune Part 2. Dropping from 2nd to 3rd place now in its 5th frame, bringing in about $11 million. Only a 37% drop. Again, I've said this now more or less 5 weeks in a row. Couldn't happen to a better film. It's made about $252 million domestically, $626 million worldwide. That's huge. For comparison, the other Timothée Chalamet big money-making movie, Wonka, I think in its entire run, I think it's still kind of in theaters, but it's been out of the top 10 for a few weeks now. I think that made about 600-something million worldwide. And this has done that in 5 weeks or so, 4 or 5 weeks. And it was an expensive movie. It was made for $190 million. But even if you double that, it's worldwide has made that much, right? So at this point, it is a success. It'll be interesting to see how much farther it can go. It's because again, it's the playing field is going to get a lot more crowded, but people love this movie. Right? Again, like I had said when it first came out, it's not like it's going to be this huge explosive opening, but it's been holding because of that word of mouth, because it's not just like people really like it. Like, it's one of the highest rated films on Letterboxd. At least it was when I went to go see it. That may have been taken down a few notches because people, the hype was so much and people go see it and then they don't like it and they give it lower scores or what have you. But I think that word of mouth is helping and people repeat viewings. I'm just so busy at this point in my life, but if I wasn't, I would definitely go back and see it again. So maybe my fiance Viviana, if you're watching, and I know you are, we should go see it. Bug me to go see it again, and we'll go see it. And speaking of Viviana, she commented here, it seems like people are not liking Imaginary. Yeah, so Imaginary coming in at number 10, only bringing in $1.4 million for the weekend, dropped from 8th to 10th, and it's only its 4th frame, 50% drop. Would not be surprised. It will probably not live to stay in the top 10 come next week. But interestingly, though, so total it's made about $26 million domestically, $36 million worldwide, only off of an $11 million budget. So, again, these cheap horror movies, it is one of the best business models in the industry. Is if you're a studio, you should just make like as many cheap horror films as you can. That was basically Jason Blum's strategy. So he's the founder of Blumhouse, and he has produced a bunch of horror films. He's done some other stuff, but he famously produced Paranormal Activity, right, which was super low budget, right? And his kind of business strategy was like, I'll produce and finance like 5 $1 million movies, right, or 10 or however many it is, and most of them will probably suck and or not make a lot of money. But one will hit and do really well. and by really well make like $30 million or whatever. But off of $1 million, that's a pretty good rate of return. So it kind of pays for the whole thing. So his kind of thing is like a numbers game. Just try to get as many of these kind of cheaper films as possible. So you look at something like Imaginary, it was only made for $11 million. So it having a $36 million gross worldwide, okay, that's pretty decent. That's a pretty decent return, right? So yeah, it's definitely, people are not necessarily liking it. It has not gotten good reviews. Not surprised that it has not done, even again off of its budget, it hasn't done particularly well. So it's not surprising that it's probably going to get knocked out of the top 10 come next week.